This is the mic, the HDMI port under the microscope. And if you can't tell what's happening here, I'm going to try to point this out. See this black spot there? How far off of this metal spot it is? This HDMI port got pushed in. It's a really flawed design that Sony did, where the only thing that held this black spot in was this little piece of metal and this little piece of metal. And just, we see this all the time. Just a little bit of force pushes the right through, and then the pins become dislodged underneath. From this view angle, you should be able to see all 19 of the pins resting flat on the HDMI board, on the PCB, and you can't because it's pushed back so far. With this type of push-in, we don't even know if the connector pads on the board are in good shape until we remove this HDMI port. So there's also a little capacitor back there that half the time it's knocked off, the other half the time it remains intact. And so the first thing we got to do in order to replace this is remove this as carefully as we can. We're going to use a hot air station at about 480 degrees Celsius, maybe push it to 500 if we need to. We're going to heat it from underneath, and we're going to put some flux down and add some leaded solder in there to kind of loosen things up, and we're just going to lift this out without any effort. We're not going to pull it out, we're just going to lift it out. So let's get started on that. So the hum that you hear in the background is a fume extractor. You never want to breathe in flux fumes or lead fumes. They're very bad for your health. Okay, this is coming really easily. I probably don't need to add any extra solder. So that comes right out. And definitely the capacitor is missing. I'm going to show you what we're talking about. That's going to be right here. Those two little pads house a capacitor, and it's necessary for 4K auto switching. Probably other things too, but at least that amount. While this is clear and free, I'm going to wick away all this solder. So we use, in conjunction with the hot air, a soldering iron, and that's going to make that solder wick away really easily. When your solder gets coated, or when your wick gets coated, you just clip off the end and move to a new piece. All right, that looks pretty good. I guess it actually didn't look that good. I was missing one of these. I wasn't looking at the screen. That looks good. The brown stuff is just burnt flux. I'm going to remove it with an alcohol prep wipe here. Could also use a cotton swab dipped in rubbing alcohol. Need at least 91%. I use 99%. 80, whatever, 70%, it's not good. Okay, so that's pretty clean. You get this one last spot there. Yes, that is clean. Now we're zoomed in because we're going to replace that capacitor that was missing from right there. It's a tiny, tiny component. For comparison's sake, this is a United States penny, and the penny has a picture of the Capitol building on the back, and of course up the stairs there's the Abraham Lincoln Memorial, and this capacitor is about that small. So, tiny. First thing we gotta do is prep that pad. Put some flux down here. And then a little bit of leaded tester, solder. Okay. Now I'm heating from underneath, and I'm going to just place that capacitor right there. Come on. There we go. Look at that. Crazy. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to prep with solder before placing the port. You can place the port and then solder it in, but this is the way I like to do it. I do think that it's the easiest way. So we're just gonna put some there, put some there. It's okay that those are blobbing up. I don't have any heat underneath right now. See that? I'll put that there. That right there. I might put a little bit more flux down here just to separate those pads. They probably separate once I put the hot air on anyway, but probably better to show you with them separated to begin with. Yeah, the board's cooled down a lot. I better put some heat on there. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be watching the 4 anchor legs. Once they heat up, they're going to just fall right into the holes, and the pads will all be molten, and that's how we'll know that we'll be about ready to put that port on. Oh, there goes 1. There goes 2, 3, 4. All right. So now we're going to take our port. I'm holding it with tweezers. Please, for the love, don't hold these with your hands. And I'm going to place that in there. Now what happens is the port was cold, so it immediately solidified all the solder. Then once the solder re-solidifies and heats the port a little bit, you see that it moved after that. Let's get that centered just right. I want to put a little bit of flux on top of the pins here. Let those all coat. And then what I want to do is I want to flow in some solder on the legs. Yep. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. I think I bumped it just a tiny bit there at the end. Let's get that just right. That looks perfect. All right, now I'm going to apply a little bit of pressure on top and remove the heat source from underneath. And I'm going to hold and wait because I don't want any of my joints to break. So we're going to be holding until we know everything's solidified. I kind of lost focus there on the video because I'm pushing down. That's okay. I think you kind of get the point. I'm holding. You know something? I think it's ready, but for the point of this video, I'm going to hold it a little bit more because you do not want this to come loose. Just hold it as long as is necessary for all that solder to cool down and the board to cool down a little bit to where you won't accidentally knock off a component or something like that. Because you pull it too early and then you accidentally knock off the capacitor that we just installed or one of these other components, something like that. Just hold it long enough. And now you can see everything looks good. Let's get that in focus. So we bring the focus to the 19 pins and not really anything else. Capacitor is a little bit cockeyed, but it's connected properly. And you can see that those all look really solid. We can push on them with tweezers one by one and make sure that they're solid. When you do good solder, you can tell, but it's never bad policy to just go ahead and push on each one and make sure that you don't have anything loose. All right, that is done. Just need to clean up some flux. I like to use alcohol and a paintbrush. Makes the work really simple. Paintbrushes are really cheap, and then you just throw them away when you're done. This one gets a little bit dirty. I throw it away. I grab another one, and I can just clean that up so easily. The paintbrush gets in between all the pins and everything like that. So it'll be nice and clean when we're done with it.